This is roots. Sometimes people ask me why I stop, why I notice old buildings, why I photograph forgotten places, why I always seem to have time for one more conversation. I usually smile because I know I didn't teach myself that. Growing up, there was often a knock at our front door. Mom worked as community worker. People arrived at all hours, sometimes during supper, sometimes after dark, sometimes carrying burdens too heavy for one conversation. There had to be boundaries. Office hours existed for a reason. Emergencies belonged with emergency services. She had to protect her family. She had to protect herself, and sometimes she even had to protect the people standing outside. Dad wasn't always in the mood for unexpected visitors. My house, my car, the words could become sharp. Mum understood something else. She knew that even when she couldn't solve someone's problem, she could still treat them with dignity. I remember one particular evening, an inebriated auntie arrived, children beside her. Mom gently asked them to wait outside for a moment. She closed the door, then returned carrying something to eat. Before handing it over, she quietly said, "Don't throw it away." Even when she had to say no, she somehow managed to say it kindly. As children, we often found ourselves sitting in homes very different from our own. Life clearly wasn't easy. The furniture was simple. The cupboards weren't full. Yet, almost without fail, someone would ask, "Would you like some coffee?" As children, we accepted it gladly. As adults, I understand differently. Sugar was a luxury. Milk wasn't always guaranteed. That bitter cup of coffee may well have been their last. To refuse it would have been to refuse the love with which it was offered. Years later, I found myself working in a community office. One morning, a man walked in. Some people only saw that he had recently been released from prison. I saw someone asking for help. He wanted a CV. Nobody else was willing. So we sat down together, one page at a time, one conversation at a time. He returned often, sometimes with questions, sometimes simply to tell another story. Once he asked me for help with fishing permits, then with paperwork for fishing cooperatives. I knew nothing about either, so I listened. He spoke about reading tides, casting nets, the snook run, the sardine run. Generations who had made their living from the sea. And then he stopped and looked at me and he said, the person approving these forms has never been to see a day in his life. Over time, he stopped being that man. People in the office began saying, that gentleman is here for you. Words matter. The way we see people matters. Sometime later, his son passed away. I didn't know what to say, so I simply went just to stand quietly with the family. Weeks after, he told me how much that visit had meant to him. Sometimes presence says what words never can. Not long ago, I found myself chatting to a petrol attendant. He warned me to be careful because of the area. We talked for a while, and I shared this story with him. When I finished, he became very quiet. Then he said, wow, I've never met a person like you. Nobody has ever seen me like that. I walked home thinking about those words, not because they had made me feel special, but because they reminded me where I had learned to look, I think it began with Mom. Dad taught me that every place has a story. Mom taught me that every person does too. Somehow those two lessons found one another and became roots. Ultimately, I think every one of us longs for the same thing: to be seen, really seen, beyond the labels, beyond the circumstances, beyond the assumptions others make before they've even spoken to us. Not because we earn it, not because we prove ourselves worthy, but because we already have worth. Sometimes we simply need someone else to help us see it. This is Roots. And perhaps the greatest journeys are not the roads we travel. They are the moments when we realize we truly begin to see one another.